Radio Al Ansar on a Sunday, you might need to. From 8 o'clock in the morning when Buddy Govender comes in, he sets the tone, and then you get to do some gardening with Rabia Cavallo, and then you get Sunday Lounge that takes you all up until 12 o'clock. So I'm very thrilled to bring a little bit of Sunday to this Tuesday afternoon, and joining me in studio today in a very different capacity to usually where she is. No bonsais here today, and we're going to talk and learn more about this very eye-opening new book by none other than Rabia herself, who is a holistic empowerment specialist and an advocate for survivors. The book that she's releasing is a comprehensive guide to understanding how narcissists use tools of manipulation and control to create trauma bonds that trap their victims. It provides strategies for navigating the complexities of these relationships safely and offers a pathway to healing. That's to give you an idea what the book is about. But let's just rewind a little bit. Rabia, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Tuesday's Social Network.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salam to all the listeners and to our viewers on the TikTokers, on the Facebooks, on the YouTubes. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have you here today and to talk to you in this light is a first as well for us. Let's have that music out a bit in the back, Ted, there. Thank you so much. So I can give Rabia my full attention without enjoying my ad in the background. But it's wonderful to talk to you in this light and about this book as well. It's been a journey. It's been a long process. I know you've mentioned several times in our conversations, I'm busy with the book. I'm working on a book. I've heard you say that for the longest time. So I'm finally able to discuss it with you in the open. I think this is your first official radio interview to talk about it. I know you were on another media network as well, but let's explain first that word that is so coming up so prominently, the word narcissism.
Yes.
We hear it a lot. We've seen it on social media. We're talking abuse these past few days. Kelly's been talking about it. Most shows have been discussing it. And we've had speakers, victims of abuse, counselors come on the program as well. That is one aspect of it.
Yeah.
But abuse isn't what you just see, women that are bruised, blue and purple and pink. That isn't all what it's about. What is narcissism and why is it so spoken about so often, or maybe misunderstood?
So there's a lot of misunderstanding, as you rightly say, around narcissism. And narcissism, although it is a personality disorder, it basically comes from an ancient myth of a guy by the name of Narcissus, who was walking past a garden and he saw a pond of water and saw his reflection and fell in love with himself. And he spent so long looking at his reflection that eventually, some stories say he drowned and other stories say he died of starvation. And where he died, the flower Narcissus came up. So that is the mythological story. So that
That's the first time there was a flower called Narcissus?
There is a flower called a Narcissus. I shall have to bring you one. So
I don't want those in my garden.
They are absolutely beautiful.
Oh, they are?
They are really beautiful. So narcissism is an excessive discussion of self-love. So you're exhibiting an excess of self-love. It's an excess of superiority over other people that leads to emotional and psychological abuse that can then escalate into physical abuse. Not always, but it can. Certainly sexual, financial, emotional, psychological, all of these types of abuse happen with narcissists. Now, some people will say, is every abuser a narcissist? Not necessarily. However, in order to be a narcissist, you need to find yourself superior to someone else. In order to be a narcissist, you need to put your rights and your wants above them. So isn't that the core of every type of abuse?
And that doesn't necessarily only involve an intimate relationship.
Absolutely.
That you could look at from a work relationship.
Yes.
You get some bosses, your CEOs of companies, your chairmen. It could even be a school environment, a learning environment.
Families.
Oh, absolutely. In the spiritual sense as well. So there's so many levels and so many levels of that to think about. If you wish to contribute to the program in any way, pose a question, comment, query, whatever it may be, or share your own personal experience, please share it with us as well. The WhatsApp line is open, 060-904-1056. So in this book, why do you call it a guide? So you mentioned it's not an autobiography, it's not your personal story, but it's a book you wish you had at that time. Why?
It's a book I wish I had because there's a lot of information out there about narcissism and there's a lot of misinformation about narcissism. And also, when you are going through emotional and psychological abuse, you're not necessarily sure what it is that you're seeing. And in dealing with clients over the last 31 years as a social worker, I'm able to help them in the point that they are at. But I've not come across yet a full guide that tells you, look, these are the different types of the narcissists. These are the manipulation strategies. This is what you do about it. This is how you heal. Here is a quiz to find out, are you at risk? Here is a quiz to find out what is your approach to relationships, and then here are certain tools that you can use to stay safe while you're in the relationship, because some people can't leave, and therefore it is a guide. However, in as much as it is not autobiographical, there are stories in that book that come from my experiences in abuse, and they are very honest accounts of what happened. And there are stories in that book from my clients' journeys where the clients have approved that that information be shared. Of course, names changed to protect the innocent, but it's not about who the narcissists are. We do not want to glorify them. They've had their time. It's about the victims and the survivors, and I differentiate between a victim and a survivor.
Also, if you think you're a victim, sometimes, like you mentioned, you're not even aware that what you're experiencing isn't normal.
Yeah.
You may be in a certain work situation. You may be in your first job.
Yes.
Or we've got people, and we spoke about this yesterday with Keegan. We said we've got younger people now entering the work environment, so they may be dealing with a toxic boss, for example, or something with the other, or maybe you're newly married or something, you're encountering or living a certain way until you step out of that mold and somebody tells you, is she always like that, or is he always like that, and that situation isn't normal. What are certain things, or if you could perhaps give some examples, certain tactics or certain things that people need to perhaps look out for?
Sure.
Do you include that in your quiz form, or how does that work?
So that is actually listed. So you can go through each one of the manipulation and control strategies. It's a breakdown of how it happens, how to work around it. So some of the things, for instance, is to isolate you. You mentioned something so important. You said you're not aware until someone tells you, hey, are they always like that? But often people don't see that, because the narcissist, it's not that a narcissist has no empathy. A narcissist has selective empathy.
Okay.
They are selectively empathic to the people that they think will help them, depending on their particular type of narcissism. The grandiose narcissist, malignant, etc., covert. There's lots of different types. Communal narcissists that want to be seen in community, and all of these things. So depending on the type of narcissism, a narcissist will be empathic to those people that he or she feels can be there for them, can help them, including also the flying monkeys that can then substantiate their lies against the victim when they turn the big switch and devalue and discard.
Is a narcissist then somebody that you have to learn to just manage? Is it somebody that you can actually live with?
You can live with a narcissist, but it's not a life. It is just existence. Because is it a life if you cannot have a mind of your own? You may not have an opinion of your own. You have no rights except the rights that the narcissist feels works for them. So you have no voice. Your opinion, even your words, the way that you speak, are interpreted through their own filters of their own insecurities. A narcissist, deep-seated, is an extremely insecure person, an extremely selfish but insecure person. So although you can live with a narcissist, you are merely existing. And unfortunately, the repercussions of living with a narcissist are not just the emotional and the psychological pain, but actual brain damage. And then physiological effects, everything from being constantly sick to weight gain to memory loss. So it's not a life. You are not living your whole best self for your kids or for yourself.
Fantastic. It gets deep because you start thinking, you start to cross-examine different scenarios, maybe, even if it's from your own life, that you start to think when you have encountered somebody that could potentially have been a narcissist without that person maybe even realizing.
Yes.
Do you think that it's important to make that person realize that that's what their behavior is?
You can't make a narcissist believe that they are a narcissist.
Yeah.
They will always flip the switch on you. And the fact that you say to a narcissist, you know, this that you are doing, I feel that it is hurtful. That will be turned around and said, for instance, why are you always complaining? Why are you making me out to be the bad guy or the bad girl? You see, look at you. You have a problem with everything, and it just becomes an entire monologue for the next 2 hours to break you down so that you no longer speak up, so that you no longer have a voice.
Wow. If you wish to contribute, if you feel also that you perhaps could be in a situation like this, maybe you're identifying with what Sister Rabia is saying as well, please pop us a WhatsApp message 060-904-1056. There's an interesting, a really interesting focus on holistic healing in your book as well.
Yes.
So tell us, how do things like managing the different aspects of your life or remedies, how are you tying in the two to healing holistically?
So typically, if you go to a psychologist and you're going for talk therapy, what happens? You have a problem in a relationship, you're seeing a psychologist or even a social worker like myself, and you're going through talk therapy, you're talking through things, you're learning to process things, that's well and good. But what happens to what's going on in your body at the same time? Because you are living under so much stress and so much cortisol for such an extended period of time that your amygdala's size actually changes. So your brain becomes damaged. The size of your amygdala becomes enlarged so that you begin to filter only that which serves the narcissist. It literally rewires your brain. So you go to a psychologist or to a social worker, maybe they work with a psychiatrist who gives you an antidepressant, an anti-anxiety tablet and a sleeping tablet, and that's it. But you are now dependent on those things. And holistic healing is about, you may need that because I'm a complementary health practitioner that makes it holistic. You may need that temporarily. But how do we wean you off that and give you other coping mechanisms? For instance, breathing tools. For instance, journaling. For instance, taking on exercise and moments of self-care. How do you work all of those together? For instance, meditation. Some people don't know how to meditate, or they think it's a Far Eastern thing that's against Christianity or against Islam. And it's not. It's a process simply of guiding your mind for someone whose mind is on someone else's leash.
Wow. That's so powerful. Whose mind is on someone else's leash. And I'm trying to think, how important would that be? It now makes so much of sense when you see, again, we're completely not talking about physical abuse here at all. This is something else.
Yes.
This is, like you said, if the mind has been on a leash for a long period of time, and you have a woman that's now in her 80s, for example, who's lived that type of life, it's taken a toll on her health in every possible way. And that's exactly what you're saying.
And in every other relationship, because you no longer have a self-esteem, you no longer have a personal filter, you no longer have personal discernment. In fact, I'll give you an example. When I walked away from my narcissistic abuser, I actually found myself at times in situations, I was about to have a meeting or about to go or about to come onto radio even, and I would hear myself say to myself, oh, our women don't do that, but it wouldn't be my voice. Isn't that freaky? I had this person's voice ingrained in my head. Because in my case, I met my narcissist around the time of reverting to Islam. You're someone who could answer all these questions, someone who was Hafiz, who should have known better, you know. But at the end of the day, when your brain is hijacked, everything else suffers. So you go from being a vibrant, energetic person, a life of, you know, the environment, someone who's loving and kind, but also filled with joy, to being someone who is fearful, whose memory has failed, who is quiet, who is withdrawn, who will not seek help, because seeking help equals punishment.
And that's the important one. They're actually seeking help. And this is so different to the typical stories you would talk about now with GBV and gender-based violence. This is something else when you're in a situation and you're just avoiding actually addressing it head on because of possible repercussions. Let's take a quick break. And when we kind of come back, let's go deeper into toxic relationships and how we can handle that. And we want your messages and your contributions as well. 060-904-1056. Do you think you've encountered a toxic relationship? Do you know somebody that has, and how would they handle it? Have you ever met somebody that you perhaps now realize that person was a narcissist? So let's just think now. Let's open those windows and think who and how we can possibly address the narcissist in our lives. I'm Salma Kazi Wahab. If you've just tuned in, welcome into it. I'm sitting in for Zahir Basa while he's away this week, and we're bringing to you some interesting conversations. Joining me in studio today is Rabia Cavallo herself, and today we're talking about her upcoming book. I love the name, A Cult of One. We're going to get into that name now in a bit.
Yes.
But let me just, before we left off, we want to just remind the listeners that you can share your stories if you'd like, or your contributions or your thoughts. 060-904-1056. Do you think a book like this would actually be helpful to people in situations that they perhaps have not identified yet as a narcissistic situation or a toxic relationship? When I know of somebody who was newly married, and it was said to her that be careful when she was sharing some things about her situation, and this person looked to her and said, just be careful it doesn't become a toxic relationship. And I remember thinking to myself, what does she mean by that? Like, this person is so happy, she's getting married and stuff. Why would she think it's a toxic relationship? But now, 11 years later now, when that person is no longer married anymore,
Right.
but now it almost makes sense, because now you hear of certain things that happened in their relationship, and the light switch kind of goes on, and you're like, that's what she was referring to, because that person was more experienced and married. Why would she have said that? Why use the words a toxic relationship? What makes a relationship toxic? And not just marriage, just in general.
Yeah, anything that's poison, that's going to poison your mind or poison your emotions and steal your peace, is toxic. Now, there are toxic moments in every relationship and working relationship, but it gets labeled toxic when the resolution itself is toxic. There is no out for that, except that the biggest, baddest wins. Basically, it's always a battle of the wills. That makes it toxic. If you're in a relationship of any kind, business, work, family, love, where you can communicate with one another, where you can say no and you're safe to say no, you're okay. When you can express your opinion, your thoughts, your desires, when you can talk through problems and be heard, then you're okay. But when only one person is being heard, one person is doing the talking, and then they are telling you what you should think and how you should feel and how you should behave, that becomes toxic. So it could have been any number of things. Toxicity is also about the way that they relate to you, the way that someone relates to you. A toxic boss, for instance, may make you feel always insecure about yourself, may make you feel incapable, or on the opposite end, you may have a toxic colleague or a toxic boss that makes you out to be someone who is too over the top, too participatory. That is also toxic. That is also toxic because it also damages the person in that work environment that says, well, then if I can't help and I can't contribute, then I must kind of, you have to dim your light for this boss or for this colleague.
That's a big one. Dimming the light. That should be everyone's motto for 2025. Nobody be dimming their lights for anybody.
No.
Come 2025. It's you light your light and you shine away.
Yes.
Inshallah, for everybody. Ameen. But let's talk a little bit about the trauma bonding that I see is a theme also in your book as well. Explain to us what that is about and how it affects your relationships, or how it comes out of these relationships that you address in the book as well. Maybe some examples also of what trauma bonding would be.
Yeah. So think of the brain as a forest.
Okay.
And you walked into this forest in a relationship, and the first time that you're walking together in this forest, you're going to hack away as you try to find your way. You're hacking away and you're creating kind of a pathway. It's difficult, you're kind of struggling together and so forth. But eventually, over time, it becomes a trodden path and it becomes easier to walk. It doesn't mean to say it's a safe path. So with trauma bonding, what happens is you've walked this path of abuse and then love bombing. So devaluing and hoovering, devaluing and hoovering. So they love you, they love you, they love you, they hate you. They love you, they love you, they love you, they hate you. You're excellent, you're terrible. You're excellent. So eventually you're not walking a proper path. Your whole forest is hacked down, and you're sitting there thinking, what happened?
Where's the forest?
Who am I even? Never mind who's the forest. Who am I? So trauma bonding happens where the narcissist or the abuser makes you believe that without them you cannot breathe, you cannot survive. And you actually believe it because you have taken responsibility for their emotional, mental, physical, sexual, possibly financial well-being, depending on that relationship. So when you're taking responsibility for them and then you try to pull away, imagine you've literally molded into and with this person. They have groomed you, they've programmed your brain to think, to see the world the way they see it. So you don't even know how to think without them anymore.
That's incredible.
So now when women or men leave a narcissistic abusive relationship, what happens is they feel completely lost.
Yeah.
There's a sense of desperation. You can't breathe, you can't sleep. You physically, I've had some ladies say to me, Rabia, I think I'm going to die. I don't think I'm going to make it, because the pain is so much. What we don't see is the bruising that happens to the actual brain as a result of this. The bruises on the outside from a physical beating, you can see that, you can heal it. But the bruises that happen internally, you can't, especially when you've actually now sitting with brain damage. You have to undo all of that. And so self-love is the river that you need to walk to begin the healing process. Because nothing happens until you can find even a mustard seed's worth of faith enough to trust and love yourself. Just a little today, in a tiny thing today. And then tomorrow maybe you trust yourself in something bigger. But trauma bonding erodes your trust in yourself, your ability to make decisions, your ability to remember facts, because they will tell you, no, that didn't happen. You didn't say that. I didn't say that. No, you said this. And it's called narcissistic confabulation. I remember sitting in a conversation for 4 hours with my narcissist where I was not allowed to speak. I begged to be excused. I literally begged like a pauper. Please, may I be excused? I'm feeling ill. I need to throw up. I can't do this. Please, will you release me?
What is being said to you in those 4 hours?
In those 4 hours, why I'm worthless, why I'm useless, why I'm not a good person to be with, why I'm fake, or anything that they could pull on. Why my speaking with my hands is offensive. Why my use of the word night-night is an insult because I'm telling the person to F off by saying night-night. Everything, any little piece of the way that you walk, the way you hold your body, the way you greet, everything about you is under a microscope and everything is destroyed.
A listener says, what about women who keep children away because of a separation? Is that also narcissistic behavior?
Not necessarily. I mean, if a woman or a man is keeping their child away from a narcissist or an abuser or an alcoholic in order to protect the child from safety, any family court will endorse that. However, if the mother or the father perceives that there is great damage in being with this person, then I second it. I say, give the access, but let that access be supervised. The problem is narcissists aren't supervised. They will not be supervised.
Also, they play games. Am I right?
All the time.
Because it's almost like, from what you're saying now, and I'm learning myself because I didn't know until recently, and you explained it to me. Sama, this is what a narcissist is. And I find it so interesting because we can encounter these types of people all the time in our work, everywhere. And it's in general in our community when we're tackling different issues, you're meeting a narcissist personalities. So another term that comes out quite strongly in your book, explain to us what it is. We're just a few minutes to go till 4 o'clock, is love bombing.
Yes.
What is that? Tell us about that.
Love bombing is how they groom you to stay. Love bombing is what programs you. It's what makes you think. It's basically saying, this is who I am. I am someone who is a great catch, but I'm also someone that is really in need of you, and you're the only person that can help me. and so they can love bomb you depending on your love language. It may be through words of affirmation, it may be through gift giving. It's over the top kind of love, it's over the top kind of attention. And so there are about 11 different ways in which they can love bomb you, which I describe in the book, and how to look out for those. A dead giveaway that you're in love bombing is it's very early days, and you know, you are the end all, the be all. It's over the top. You can do no wrong. And they do this to everybody else. They tell everybody else how amazing you are, how wonderful you are.
Yeah.
So that when they discard you, they can say, you see, but I thought she was wonderful.
I was always there for her.
I was always there for her. Exactly. Or him, because there are women who are narcissists as well.
Hitting home, eh?
Yeah.
The next message that's come from a listener is, Salam's informative discussion. Please expand on how you are vulnerable to narcissistic abuse when you've had a parent or primary caregiver who is a narcissist. That's an interesting one. There's two parts of this question, so maybe answer that one
Learned
first.
behavior. It's classic conditioning. If you think of a Russian scientist in, I think it was 1902, Ivan Pavlov, he had these dogs in an experiment, and every time the dog went to eat, he would ring a bell. So eventually, when he rang the bell, the dog would salivate whether there was food or not. So what happens if you have been exposed to a narcissistic parent is you learn that the bell equals danger.
It's association, yeah.
And it's associative thinking. You've been conditioned. So now you're taking that experience unhealed, having not worked through it, not having the skills to deal with it, as I impart in counseling. And then you're taking that, transferring that into a new relationship. And there's an issue called transference, where you are looking at them, but you're not seeing them. You're listening to them, but you're not hearing them. You're hearing the person that did this to you before. And then the person that you're dealing with now, unfortunately, is bearing the brunt of what you went through before.
Absolutely. She says, she adds on to that, I'm assuming it's a he or a she, when parents raise people pleasers in the name of being polite, they make these children vulnerable to abuse. Well, your thoughts on that?
It's a wonderful statement that the listener's making, because narcissists are not born, they are made, they are raised. They are raised. When we don't hit the child, don't leave. I'm not saying that we should go about hitting children, but I'm saying when we are trying to tell people how they should raise their children, where there are no repercussions, no consequences to behavior, that becomes a problem, because that child grows up feeling entitled. And narcissism is on the rise in the world because entitlement is the woke culture. Everybody feels entitled. You know, you call me what I want you to
Freedom
call me.
of expression.
Yeah. You know, yeah.
Absolutely. Now, as you're rounding up, this is a definition, right? It is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. That is the dictionary definition of cult.
Yes.
Now, how do you bring that and tie that into your book? That is your title of the book.
Yes.
And it is deep on so many levels. Why the word cult?
Because a narcissist is unapproachable, irreprimandable, uncorrectable. They are the final and full authority on everything you say, and they will stop at nothing and use anything as a weapon to make sure that you are their sheeple, and that includes religion of any kind.
Because their interpretation of religion.
Their interpretation of religion, even if they are atheistic or don't have a religion, their interpretation of themselves, they have then faith in themselves. That is their religion. And they groom you the same way a cult member will. And the fear and intimidation and threat tactics that they use to keep you imprisoned are the same as a cult member would. The fact that they use flying monkeys to do their bidding and come to you and say, oh no, but you should understand, oh shame, but it's what he's been through before. All of this, using those, everything that a cult leader would do to a group, a cult member, narcissist, does to his wife. And unfortunately, in Islam, we then have the compounded effort where men are using polygamy as a weapon, not for the right reasons, using it as a weapon to further humiliate or cause pain or inflict harm by making the previous person out into being a demon. And victims believe it, survivors believe it, because They are the
It's
cult
been imprinted
leader.
into your,
Imprinting, exactly that.
Yo. There's so many layers to this discussion, and I think this really needs to be unwrapped in so many ways, because we're so used to talking about victims of abuse and she's the victim, and how this is abuse. But it happens on so many different levels in so many different environments. So in wrapping up, in finality, let's talk about your book itself.
Yes.
Is it a thick one, a big one, a medium-sized one? And I'm thinking about people that are in narcissistic relationships that want to perhaps get the book, right? How they're going to hide it. Where should they keep it? They need to keep it safe.
Do you know what? I always find the best place to hide anything is in full view. And that is what Hitler did. Hitler, everybody was looking for his aeroplane. He had it on Expo. Everyone was looking for it. It was on Expo.
Yeah.
So narcissists expect you to be hiding things. So don't hide it. Put it in full view, where they're not going to ask questions about it, but put it in full view.
Ah, fantastic. Don't hide the book then. Put the book on the front. When does it release? What ages is it appropriate for?
So the book is appropriate, actually, I would imagine, because it also deals with stealthing and it does deal with rape as well, then I would imagine, from the age of 18 is probably more appropriate for readers.
For sure. So when can people expect to get their hands on the first copies?
So the first copies will be available on the 26th at the Durban Summer Souk, inshallah, Ameen, and I will have it on special. It will be a special running just for the time of the Souk. After that, on Takealot, on Amazon, and through my website, www.rabiacarvalho.com.
Hey, Rabia Carvalho. Wonderful. All the best for that book and for the launch, inshallah, at Durban Summer Souk. Thank you so much for spending the time with us this afternoon. And all the best. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.